welcome back to my channel. This is Abhisha Gulati. Till now, we have studied the 5 theories under the psychometric approach and the 3 theories under information processing approach of intelligence. Today, we will study what are the individual differences in intelligence, what are the types of intelligence tests, what is creativity, and what is aptitude, etc. Now, the theory of intelligence, the concept of intelligence was studied by a lot of psychologists, a lot of researchers throughout a period of time. Okay. Now, as we studied last year in chapter number 6, learning, whatever we learn depends on our genetics, right? Whatever we learn depends on our genetics. Genes provide a certain boundary beyond which we cannot go. One can do just their best but within their limit, which is set by the genes. Similarly, just as learning, some boundaries, some limits are set by the genes, and environment supports you to grow within those limits. Just like that, intelligence has a similar course to follow. Now, when there were theorists who started to study intelligence, one set of researchers stated that intelligence depends on genes. So these researchers thought that, okay, good genes means high intelligence, bad genes means not so intelligent. So this was substantiated on the basis of nurture and nature studies. These studies showed that genes and the genetic structure has the base of intelligence. Okay, I'll just change the slide for you. Okay. Now, the evidences for heredity influences on intelligence comes mainly from studies of twin and adopted children. Now, we are first understanding कि एक group of people कहते हैं, ठीक है, अब दो approaches है basically कि intelligence क्यों है या क्या different है, एक ज़्यादा intelligence है, एक ज़्यादा intelligent है और एक कम intelligent है, तो इसमें क्या individual differences है? एक group of researchers and psychologists said it is because of your genes. Another group of researchers and psychologists said no, it is because of your environment. Okay, so we are starting with proof that what all they've researched about. So they actually researched on twins and adopted children so that they can understand, they can devise a conclusion that what causes intelligence more, what is more responsible for intelligence. Is it your nature, is it your genes, or is it your nurture, which is your environment? So the evidence for heredity influences come mainly from the studies of twin and adopted children. Now, the highest intelligence correlation was found in twins who were identical and whose intelligence correlated to almost 0.90. That means that the genes of identical twins is almost similar. Okay, this is showing that their intelligence is correlating up to 0.90, which means basically up to 90% their intelligence is more or less the same. And twins who are separated at birth also showed similar characteristics in their intelligence, in their personality, in their behavior. So this is somewhere indicating that okay, genes has certain role to play. Those identical twins who were reared in different environments, their intelligence correlated to 0.72. And those fraternal twins who were reared together, their intelligence correlated to 0.6, and those siblings who were reared together, their intelligence correlated to 0.5, and siblings reared apart, their intelligence correlated to 0.25. Now, this statistic you will have to remember. One mark question will come. I'll just simplify for you. So, in identical twins reared together, their intelligence correlated to 0.9. Then identical twins reared apart, their intelligence correlated to 0.72. Fraternal twins, you can write it in a table format. My handwriting is not good though. Fraternal twins reared together, their intelligence correlated to 0.6. Fraternal twins reared apart, their correlation is, I don't think so, it's not given. So not given. And siblings reared together, their correlate intelligence is 0.5, and siblings reared apart, their intelligence correlate to 0.25. So if you're saying siblings reared apart, their intelligence correlation is just 0.25, which is showing that though there is a role of the genes involved in it, but the role of environment is not less at all. Okay, there is a role, there is a constructive role of environment in determining your intelligence. Now, another line of evidence comes from adopted studies. Now we have talked about twin studies. Okay, so we mentioned about twin studies. What did we conclude? We conclude that okay, genetics and genes have a role to play, because we are seeing the correlation of identical twins whose genes are almost similar is up to 0.9, which is a lot, right? Now we talk about adopted children. So, studies have shown that children's intelligence is more similar to their biological parents rather than their adopted parents. In their early years, the intelligence of an adopted child is more similar to the biological parents of the child. But as a child grows up, the intelligence moves towards the intelligence of their adoptive parents, which means that though genes have a role to play, environment is no less. Environment also has a role to play. Also, children who are from disadvantaged homes, their intelligence, and children who are not economically well developed, or who are not economically well fortuned, if they are adopted by parents who have high income, who have high socio-economic status, who are educated, these children exhibit a large increase in their intelligence scores, which is telling us that though uh, they have a lower IQ in their genes, but because of their environment, their intelligence scores have increased. So this tells us that the role of environment is also there. Also, there's a evidence that environmental deprivation lowers down intelligence. If you are not providing a proper nutrition to the child, if the child is malnutrition, if the child is not given proper socio cultural guidance, if the child is not given care, love, and support from their caregivers, then there can be lower down rates of the intelligence scores. Whereas if children are given nutrition, good family background, and good facilities, then that has a huge impact on their intelligence. Okay. Now another example can be that if we compare two people, okay, two people who both have low IQ, both have mild intellectual disability. Okay, so both have low IQ, lower than 70 IQ. One child is kept in an environment where the child is not given food on time, the child is not given proper care, the child is not going to school, and the other child with the same IQ is given a lot of care, a lot of food, support, he is going to school, and the child is getting proper schooling, proper education, guidance towards everything in life. So the survival rate or the IQ score in the longer run would be higher of that child who is given a good environment, a better environment. That is why it is said that nature gives us a limit. Nature sets a limit that okay, if this is the box, this is your limit. This box is your limit. You can develop within it. But environment helps you to rise from this level to up to this level. So you're getting me. So there's a consensus, there is a general opinion among psychologists that intelligence is a product of both nature and nurture. Okay, both nature and nurture are equally important, and while heredity sets limits, nurture helps us to fulfill those limits. So intelligence is a complex product of the interaction of heredity and environment. Heredity can be best viewed as something that is setting us a range within which an individual's development is actually shaped by support and opportunities of the environment. Another example could be Bill Gates or Mukesh Ambani, though they did not belong to a very huge socioeconomic background in their childhoods, but because of their hard work, but because of their environment, the support they were given, the knowledge they were given, uh, the good nutrition, good facilities, schooling, everything, other environmental factors, they helped them to grow successful beings. So, though heredity sets a limit, beyond the limits set by heredity, you cannot go. But you can, with the help of environment, you can reach up to the limit set by heredity for you. Now, assessment of intelligence. Now, we have talked about intelligence. We have talked about what are the theories of intelligence. Let's talk about the history of intelligence. How did the assessment of intelligence takes place? So, primarily, it was the Chinese who actually developed this idea of getting IQ tests for their army. But if you talk about formal terms, so in 1905, Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon. Alfred Binet, we talked about his one factor theory, right? He was a French psychologist who actually was the first one, both of them. In 1905, Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon were the first ones who actually made a successful attempt to formally measure intelligence. And why did they do so? Because of the French army, which needed this during the World Wars. Okay. Now, in 1908, both of them gave the concept of mental age. What is mental age? Mental age is your intellectual development. Mental age is the intellectual development or the level of intellectual capacity of a person in comparison to others who belong to the same age group. For example, if I am 5 years old, then I can do tasks of a regular if I can do tasks of a regular 5-year old, that means that my mental age is also 5 years old. But if I am 5-year old, but I can solve questions, math questions, for example, just an example. If I can do work that a 10-year-old can do, if I can solve math questions of a 10-year-old, then I have a higher mental age than my biological age. So chronological age is your biological age from birth. What are you aware? Or you when you subtract your current year, like 2021, when you subtract your age of year of birth from it, you will get your chronological age. So a bright child's mental age is higher than the chronological age, and dull child's mental age is lower. So, if a bright child is able to, or 5 years old, so the chronological age of that child is 5, and the mental age of that child is 7. So, this is showing us that 7 is greater than 5, that means the child is bright. And vice versa, if the mental age of this child, of a child, and another child is maybe 3, so the child is 5 years old, but the child can only do tasks of a 3 year old, or average performance level is just of a 3 year old. So then the mental age is less than the chronological age, which suggests that the child is not bright, or maybe the child is not as bright as others are. Now, earlier, intellectual disability was seen as two mental age below chronological age. So if the mental age is two below chronological age, for example, mental age is 3, chronological age is 5. So this case scenario telling us that the child is intellectually disabled, or the child has mental disability. Intellectual disability. Sorry, not mental disability, mental retardation and intellectual disability. So this can come for a 1 mark question. This was told by Simon and Binet. Okay. Now, in 1912, in 1912, William Stern. William Stern was the one who was a German psychologist. He devised the concept of intelligence quotient, IQ. Now, this is a very well known concept. IQ means dividing your mental age by chronological age and multiplying by 100. Why are we multiplying by 100? Because we want to get rid of the decimal point. Now, I think so. The formula given in this notes is missing, but I'll just share the formula with you. I'll just add them. So, if you will see the notes in your description below, you will see the correct formula. Now, IQ is equal to mental age divided by chronological age into 100. You can write down in your notebooks. It's also written in your book. Okay, so if I talk about the IQ of that child, if the mental age of the child is 5 and the chronological age of the child is also 5, then the IQ of the child will be 100, because you'll cancel it, right? So I'll give you a question and you write down the answer in the comment section below. If the mental age of the child is 12 and the chronological age of the child is 10, then what is the IQ of the child? Let me know in the comment section down below. Okay. If you want, I can also solve another question. So, a question given in the NCERT is find out the IQ of a 14-year-old with a mental age of 16. So, if the IQ of the child is 14, if you want to calculate the IQ of the child and the mental age is 16, chronological age is 14, and we'll find the IQ with it. Let's solve another question. So the question says calculate mental age. Also write the question down in somewhere in a note so you can solve it along with me. Calculate the mental age of a 10-year-old with IQ of 120. Okay, the age of the child is 10 years old. The IQ is 120 and mental age is x not given to us and we'll multiply with 100, right? So if we do it, we solve it, it's 120 into 10 upon 100 is equal to x, which is, okay, so it is 125. So this IQ of this child is 125. In a similar way, you can solve different questions. The question I told you, you have to solve it and you have to let me know in the comment section below. Okay. This is the first task probably that I have given you guys. Now, important thing to remember that 100 is used as a multiple multiplier so that we are avoiding decimal point and we are making our calculations easy for calculating the IQ of any person. Now, what are the characteristics of an IQ distribution? Now, if you take a population, now what is a population? Population is group of people. If you take a bunch of people, for example, you take 100 people, okay? And you take the data of 100 people or any population, bunch of 500 people, bunch of 100 people, 20 people, any population, then what is the average IQ score of people in that population? This is the distribution of IQ. So the average IQ score of people mostly in a population is between 90 and 110, and the most average IQ, like the mean IQ, mean, you have studied this in statistics probably in your junior classes. Mean is what? Mean is the average of, you divide the sum of all and sum of all the items in a data and you divide it with the number of items, you get your mean. So the mean of any population, mean IQ of any population is 100. Okay, that means, and on an average in any population, any group of people, the an average IQ of people would be near 100 or would be between 90 to 110. Okay, now how, there's a very important question that how do psychologists classify people on the basis of IQ? Now since you do not have descriptive questions for this chapter, a question can come. Can you see the table on this screen? Okay, so if you can see the table on the screen, then the question can very well come that tell me which IQ range lies in the superior descriptive level, or tell me what percent of the population lies in borderline IQ. So you have to remember this. This is very important even in this class 12, even if you pursue higher in your higher studies. So it's very easy to remember. Write it down 2 or 3 times and you will be able to remember it very easily. There's no memory technique to remember it, honestly. So I am not sharing any. Now, people with IQ above 130, their intelligence is very superior. Only 2.2% of people have IQ above 120. Similarly, IQ uh, below below 70, if you can see, only 2.2% of the population has IQ below 70. Again, 120 to 130, superior population, 6.7 people have superior IQ, and IQ between 110 and 119, only 16.1 people have, and similarly 80 to 89, only 16.1 people have. 16.1% of the population has, and the average IQ, which 50% of any population has, is 90 to 109. Now, like IQ, you can also make such curves for your You can also make such curves for other psychological attributes like personality, interest, aptitude, etc. Now, some important things to remember. Let's come back to this page. Some important things to remember is that firstly, the average IQ of any population is 100, irrespective of age. Whatever is your age, the average IQ of any population is 100. Okay, first things first. Secondly, that only a few people have higher or very low scores. So only a few people would be there who have very high IQ. Like those are intellectually gifted, and very less people will be there who have very low IQ. Also, if you can notice in this picture that is displayed, this picture, this bell-shaped curve, so this IQ scores are distributed in a bell-shaped manner. This curve is called a bell-shaped curve. This is called a normal probability curve. Okay, this is called a normal probability curve, MPC. This is a type of graph in statistics. So in this graph, most average lies in the middle near the mean, and lesser values, lesser items, lesser number of items uh, are present near the end. Okay. Now, some things to remember is that some features of the normal probability curve. So, question can come: what are the features of normal probability curve in an MCQ format? So, you should remember some basic features of the normal probability curve. Firstly, the MPC is symmetrical. So I'll just again slide page. So if you can see this MPC, you can see this area is almost like a mirrored image of this area. So it is symmetrical, firstly. Secondly, it's bell-shaped, the IQ curve or IQ distribution. Thirdly, normal probability curve never touches the x-axis. Look closely, it never touches x-axis. Why? This never touches the x-axis because intelligence can never be zero. Okay, this is touching the y-axis here, but it's not. It's just showing. It's not touching the x-axis, which means intelligence of any person in any population can never be zero. Okay, zero intelligence. X-axis is representing the intelligence IQ score. तो अगर हम ग्राफ को एक्स एक्सिस को टच करवा देंगे दैट मीन्स कि एक इंसान के दो इंसान की आईक्यू जीरो हो सकती है, बट ऐसा नहीं होता. आईक्यू ऑफ एनी नो पर्सन इज जीरो. ठीक है, IQ can be very less. IQ can be like severe intellectual disability, but the IQ of a person can never be zero. This is something that you should remember. Also, if you could see here, this is not pointed, this is a curve. So you have to remember this as well. Okay. So these are certain things that you should remember while you are given a picture in front of you or while you are drawing an MPC. Now let's come back to this page. Now only a few people have very high IQ scores and very low IQ scores, right? I told you. So this frequency distribution of IQ scores tends to approximate a bell-shaped curve. This is called the normal curve, the normal probability curve. So if you're not a fan of mathematics or statistics, don't worry. This is the first and the last mathematics related stuff in your psychology book. So don't worry. And it's very easy. If you just practice drawing it 1 or 2 times, it will be fine. And also, if you don't want to practice drawing, it's fine because in your exams, an MCQ question is just coming. Okay, so you have to remember the features of this MCQ. It's symmetrical around its central value. So you can see most of the items in the population lying between the mean, lying near the average value, right? The mean IQ score is 100. Very important question. 1 marker always comes. Like most of the times in your board exams, this question for 1 marks come. Which is the mean IQ score of a population? It is 100. Now, one practical use. How can you practically use intelligence tests? One practical use of intelligence test is to identify people at the extremes of intellectual functioning. Now, let's come back to this graph again. So you can see that there are 2.2% of the people, 2.2% of people, both in these extremes. If we talk about hair, these 2.2% of the people have very superior, very high, very high IQ. And these 2.2% of the people have very low, like very low, very inferior to nahi bolungi, very low IQ. Now these people who have very high IQ, they are gifted with this IQ, right? So they are called people with intellectual giftedness. And these people with very low IQ, they have a deficiency of IQ, they have deficiency of intelligence. So this is called intellectual deficiency. One thing to remember, that in these two are extremes. Okay, most of the people belong to the middle category, and most of the people lie here. So we have talked about these two extremes, and now we'll study about these two extremes in detail. Now, variations in intelligence. What are the variations in intelligence? On one side of the panel, we have people who are intellectually deficient, and on the other side, we have people who are intellectually gifted. Now, the word intellectual disability and deficiency. First, let me clear this doubt because a lot of students have it. Intellectual deficiency. Intellectual deficiency. I'll just write it for you. Intellectual deficiency. Intellectual disability, mental retardation. These three terms are used interchangeably. Okay, firstly. Secondly, what happened was that throughout the course of time, earlier we used to call these people as mentally retarded, or we used to call this disorder as mental retardation. But then we started to shift towards intellectual disability. Okay, then we started to use the word disability, but now we use the word intellectual deficiency. So intellectual deficiency is like the most latest term to use to uh, to mention these people. Okay, now what is intellectual deficiency? First of all, the children who show intellectual deficiency यानी IQ उनकी कम होती है, they are called intellectually disabled. As a group, there is a wide variation. If you talk about people who are intellectually disabled, within this group also there are variations. Some people have less intellectual disability than some people have more. We will talk about that also. Now, this is a very important definition given by American Association of Mental Deficiency. Okay, AAMD. This definition you have to remember is it verbatim. I'm really sorry, I cannot help you in this, but the NCERT has beautifully broken down this definition so that it is very easy for you to remember. Now, according to the American Association on Mental Deficiency, intellectual disability refers to a significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning existing concurrently with deficits in adaptive behavior and manifested during the development period. Now let us understand it. बहुत easy है, कुछ भी नहीं है इसमें. सबसे पहले the American Association on Mental Deficiency, this is an association जिसने definition दी है, ठीक है? इसने बोला कि intellectual disability is significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning. जो आपकी general intellectual functioning है, जो आपकी general intellectual functioning, आपकी जो general intelligence है, आपका जो general intelligence है, जो आपको help करता है to do your everyday task, that is significantly sub-average, यानी below average है. जो एवरेज लेवल है 100, उससे सिग्निफिकेंटली बहुत कम है आपका जनरल इंटेलेक्चुअल फंक्शनिंग लेवल. ओके, फर्स्टली. सेकेंडली, जो आपका जनरल इंटेलेक्चुअल फंक्शनिंग लेवल है वो तो है ही सब एवरेज. उसकी वजह से क्या हो रहा है, यू आर अनेबल टू परफॉर्म योर डे टू डे टास्क, which is leading you to deficits in your adaptive behavior. So there are, first thing was IQ is lower than 70. ठीक है, जो भी IQ आपकी lower than 70 है, that means you are sub average intelligence. जो general functioning intellectual functioning है वो sub average है, average से कम है. तो IQ is lower than 70, first condition. Secondly, deficits in adaptive behavior. यानी what is adaptive behavior? Firstly, Adaptive behavior is a person's capacity to be independent, a person's capacity to deal with their everyday challenges, everyday environment, and an individual's capacity to adapt, shape, modify, or select his or their environment. So, intellectual deficiency का मतलब है, अगर आपको intellectual deficiency है, that means that a person has deficits in the adaptive behavior. The person is not able to perform everyday tasks. For example, the person cannot go and brush their teeth on their own. They need help. The person cannot get ready on their own. The person cannot maybe tie their shoelaces. The person cannot eat their food on their own. These day-to-day activities which are very essential for your adaptation. ये day-to-day activities में अगर आपको problem आ रही है या there are deficits in the adaptive behavior, the adaptive behavior जो आपका होना चाहिए उसमें behavior में कमी है, तो there is a sign of intellectual deficiency. So the second is deficits in adaptive behavior. So adaptive behavior is there is deficit in that. Okay, the third is that both of these conditions, deficits in adaptive behavior and lower IQ than 70, IQ lower than 70, both of these conditions should be manifested between the age of 0 to 18. So, a person whose age is between 0 to 18 and the person has low IQ than 70 and the person is experiencing deficits in adaptive behavior, is this means that the person has intellectual disability. That means that these deficits, ये कमी ऑब्जर्व होनी चाहिए आपके डेवलपमेंटल पीरियड में. अगर 20-year-old को ये प्रॉब्लम्स हो रही है बिकॉज ऑफ अ ब्रेन इंजरी में भी, तो ये इंटेलेक्चुअल डेफिशिएंसी नहीं है. या फिर अगर 30-year-old को प्रॉब्लम्स हो रही है ये बिकॉज ऑफ सम स्ट्रेस और सम फैक्टर्स, तो ये इंटेलेक्चुअल डेफिशिएंसी नहीं है. दिस शुड बी ऑब्जर्व्ड, मैनिफेस्टेड. ये सब हम ऑब्जर्व कर सकते हैं ओनली बिटवीन द एज ऑफ 0 to 18. दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. एक as far as I remember, a trick question came, I guess in boards or in some pre-board examination, that a question was given that there's a girl whose age is, there's a 20-year-old girl who is experiencing deficits in adaptive behavior and who has IQ of 65. What psychological disorder that person has? So what is this intellectual disability? So no, it is not, because the person is 20-year-old or the person is above the age of 18. Okay, it should only be manifested between 0 to 18. ऐसा हो सकता है कि आपको recognize करने में टाइम लग जाए, मे बी 20-year-old में रिकॉग्नाइज करे, बट जो इंटेलेक्चुअल डेफिशिएंसी है वो 0 to 18 के बीच में ही आकर होती है. ठीक है, नोटिस होती है. मे बी आपने नोटिस बाद में करी बट वो उस टाइम पे थी. ठीक है. Now we have understood the three features, so a question can come like who gave this definition. So American Association of Mental Deficiency gives this definition. Intellectual deficiency means IQ below 70, 70 से कम, IQ 70 or 70 से कम. And secondly, deficits in adaptive behavior. Thirdly, this should be manifested in the developmental years of the person or the child. Okay. Now, people who have intellectual deficiency also experience significant variations. यानी अगर person A है, उसको उसकी intellectual deficiency है and second को भी intellectual deficiency है, तो इन दोनों में भी variations है. There are variations. There is like a very little probability कि दोनों की intellectual deficiency similar होगी. Maybe he has IQ 50 and maybe she has an IQ of 70. So the intellectual deficiency is different. So we are now studying variations in intellectual deficiency. Okay, very important, very interesting, very easy. Okay. Now there are some categories of intellectual disability. Okay, this will also learn in chapter number 4, psychological disorders. Okay, first category is mild. So people with IQ of 55 to 70, they have mild intellectual disability. Then people between IQ of 30 to 35 to 50 to 55, they have moderate. And people whose IQ is between 20 to 25 and 35 to 40, their intellectual disability is severe. And people below IQ of 20 to 25 have profound intellectual disability. As the level of disability increases, difficulties are strongly marked. मतलब जितनी ज़्यादा disability बढ़ेगी, उतनी problems होंगी. This is but obvious, right? The lower the IQ, the more the problems. And the lower the IQ, the less is the scope of getting trained or scope of getting adaptive in your life. So these people can be trained in self-care skills. They are simple social and communication skills. All these skills can be trained in them. They can be trained in these skills, and they need to have a moderate degree of supervision though. Now, people who have profound and severe disability, specifically these two, need a lot of care, and mostly they are bedridden. So they need constant care in their life, and their lifespan is comparatively shorter. One thing to remember is that people with intellectual disability have already a lot of stigma attached to them. Okay. So it is very important for us as psychology students to understand that the fact that they have a lower IQ than others does not make them any less, firstly. Secondly, this is not in their control, and genes, environment, and different factors, prenatal environment of that child, or multiple factors cause this intellectual deficiency, and we should always be empathetic towards them, not sympathetic but empathetic towards them. Okay. Now we come to intellectual giftedness. So अभी तक हमने बात करी people who जिनकी IQ 70 से कम थी. अब हम बात करेंगे लोग जिनकी IQ is more than 130 or 120. Okay. So the study of intellectual giftedness, how did it start? So Louis Terman was a psychologist who followed the lives of 1500 children in 1925. Another one mark question. 1500 बच्चों की जिनकी IQ 130 से ज़्यादा थी उसने स्टडी करी, and he examined कि how is their intelligence related to their occupational success, how successful are they in their occupations, their jobs, their vocational areas, and how are they able to adjust in their life. So what is the correlation between high intelligence and their adjustment to life or their occupational scores? So he studied about this. Now what happened was that Louis Terman, this is also called as Terman's termites. I am not sure if it's called termites, but there is a term, so you can go search about it. This is very interesting to know that he went behind the life of around 1500 children. He researched about them. He wanted to know that is there a correlation between their success in life and their intelligence level. So we don't know what he found out, but we know that his study was very constructive. Now, the word talent and giftedness both seem to be similar. What is giftedness? Some may say that okay, the person is very talented, this person is very gifted. So, what is the difference? The difference is that talent means your exceptional activity, exceptional ability to perform in a very superior manner, perform great, perform amazing, like your superior ability to perform in a specific area is your talent. For example, I am a great dancer, that means I'm talented. But if I'm gifted, gifted is a very broad term. Okay, talent is a narrow term. So narrow means that your exceptional ability but just in one area, that is your talent. Remarkable ability in a specific field. For example, I am very spiritually talented, I am socially talented, I am a dancer, I'm great in dance. Okay, highly talented people are called prodigies. One mark question, very important. Okay, one mark. और व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन टैलेंट एंड गिफ्टेडनेस? बेसिकली टैलेंट का मतलब होता है एक फील्ड में बहुत अच्छा होना, गिफ्टेडनेस का मतलब होता है सब फील्ड्स में बहुत अच्छा होना. गिफ्टेडनेस इज जनरल एबिलिटी that is shown in superior performance in a wide variety of areas. An example can be that if you talk to a gifted student, gifted person, and the gifted person is studying maybe psychology and arts, humanities basically, and you give that gifted student a question of maybe mechanical engineering or maybe like a physics question, and you teach that person, you tell the person, okay, this is how it works, and you have to make a rocket using this. So the gifted student will show exceptional interest, exceptional ability in that field. If you ask the gifted student to dance, the gifted person can also dance. If you ask a gifted student to ride a bike, the person has never rode a bike before, the person can also ride a bike. So exceptional ability in a wide variety of field is giftedness, and talent is just ability in one particular field. Both are important, but both are different. And prodigies are highly talented people. Okay, very important to remember, because we often get confused between these words, and a one mark question often comes that who are prodigies, or are prodigies gifted? No, they are highly talented people. Important qualities of highly gifted people. To remember this, you can say A C C. Okay, one is that they have high ability, they have high creativity, and they have high commitment. So highly gifted people have high ability to do their daily tasks, ability to perform their daily tasks, their high ability to process information, to utilize information. So they have an inborn capacity to do all these things. Okay. Firstly, secondly, they have high creativity, so they think out of the box. If you give them one question, they will use their diversion thinking, they will use their inductive reasoning, they will think in multiple ways, they will be highly creative, they will use their past experiences to produce novel solutions to the problem. Also, they are highly committed. A high level of dedication is shown by them for each and every task. For example, if a gifted engineer is told to make cookies, okay? If a gifted engineer is told to make cookies and the person has never cooked before and the person may not have a liking for that, but the person will be highly committed. He will start making these cookies from scratch, maybe start even kneading the dough and doing all the process on their own. So they show a high level of dedication. So there are three basic abilities that mostly teachers notice in gifted students. First is high ability, so they are able to do multiple tasks. They are great in almost everything. If you tell them to dance, they will dance. If you tell them to sing, they will sing. If you tell them to teach you, they will teach you. So they have high ability. Secondly, they are highly creative, so they can create multiple solutions for you. And thirdly, they are committed. Whatever they do, they are very committed in their tasks. Now let's talk about that how giftedness develops in childhood. Okay, so giftedness is most visible in childhood. They develop speech and language earlier than other children. So gifted children develop their speech and language patterns earlier than other children. Normally, like a child, if example, I am not sure about this, but if for example, normally if a child develops the speech pattern by the age of like 1, and gifted children might develop their speech patterns around like 8 months. So they have a great attention span, they have excellent memory capacity, they will get bored easily. If you start giving them one activity over and over again, if you just show and tell them, okay, go cycle every day over and over again, they'll get bored easily because their mental capacity is great. Now, gifted students will also show visible overt behavior. For example, different visible overt behaviors. For example, they'll play a different game every few days. Like today, they play maybe Sudoku. Tomorrow, they'll play basketball. Then chess. So they show a very wide range of behaviors. Now, most people with giftedness show a likelihood of preference to indulge in solitary activities. So they like to indulge in activities where they are alone. They have a preference for solitary activities. If you tell them that what do you want to choose? Do you want to work in a group on this project or do you want to work alone? They'll most probably choose to work alone. Okay? Now, they have advanced logical thinking, questioning, and problem solving behavior. They have high speed in processing information. They can process information very, very, very quickly. They have superior generalization and discrimination. That means that if you ring two similar musics, then they have superior qualities to generalize and discriminate. They have advanced level of intrinsic motivation. Their motivation is intrinsic in nature. One mark of question, always remember. They are motivated from within. They do not need superficial things like awards, appreciation, attention of others. They are motivated from within to accomplish their goals. Okay. Now, they are independent and non-conformist thinkers. So, if 10 students in the class are saying that the answer of the question is A part, but the gifted person thinks that no, the answer is B part, then the person will not change his or her opinion. The person will be independent and non-conformist in nature. They prefer solitary activities that I told you for long periods of time. Now, performance or intelligence test is not just only one measure to identify the gifted people. A question used to come for 2 marks on this, but a 1 marker MCQ can come on this. That what are the different ways in which we can identify people who are gifted? So many people who are gifted can be identified using teachers' judgment. How are teachers looking up to them? You can ask the teachers, maybe the teachers think that this person is exceptional. You can check their school achievement record. You can ask their parents, take their interview. You can indulge in peer and self rating. You can ask their peers. You can ask them if they are up to a certain age, like above the age of 10, or if you are up to a certain age to make a decision of their own, and you can ask them to self rate themselves. These all can be used in combination with the IQ test to recognize and identify gifted children. Now, one thing we have to remember that gifted students are very different from regular students with regular intelligence. And since they're different, the teaching pattern used to teach them should also be different. Not anybody can understand what they are taught, and they are already mostly know what is taught in school. So to reach up to their full potential, gifted students should be given special attention at school, and different educational programs should be provided beyond the level of school so that they are able to progress, so that they are able to reach their full potential. And these programs could involve skill development programs, programs that help them in productive thinking, in decision making, in communication, public speaking, planning, etc. Now, another point that I forgot to mention is that gifted people, anybody can be gifted, firstly. Okay. And gifted people are not just great in academics, but they have a wide range of abilities. So you cannot say that gifted people are just only those who score high grades. They may score high grades, but gifted people can also be singers, can also be athletes. So they can also be a gifted athlete. A gifted athlete will be great in almost everything, but may have another superior quality in maybe sports. So since there are variations in people, in general, there are also variations of gifted students. Some gifted students may be exceptional in singing as compared to other activities, though they will be exceptional in other activities as well. Some people would be exceptional in reading or writing very quickly. So this is how it works. Okay. Now let's conclude with this last topic of this video, and then we'll conclude this video. Last topic is types of intelligence tests. Now, there are several types of intelligence tests, and we have studied this in chapter number 2 of class 11. First is on the basis of the administration. How are you administrating? Administrating matlab how are you supervising, looking forward, conducting? क्या प्रोसीजर यूज करके आप कंडक्ट कर रहे हो टेस्ट को. तो एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के बेसिस पे इंटेलिजेंस टेस्ट कैन बी ग्रुप टेस्ट एंड इंडिविजुअल टेस्ट. व्हाट इज इंडिविजुअल टेस्ट? Individual test is test which is administered on one person at a time, and a group test is a test which is administered on different people along together, like 10 people together. In individual tests, you need rapport formation. Rapport formation is forming a comfortable environment, comfortable bond between the person who is taking your test and between the test, the person who is taking the test. So the subject's moods, the subject's feelings, everything we need to understand in order to take the individual's test. In group test, there is no window of rapport formation because there are a lot of people. You cannot go and mingle and form a rapport with everyone. So rapport formation does not exist in group tests, and this is the difference between the two. Another difference is that individual tests allow people to answer in a written format mostly, and group tests are mostly in an MCQ format. So another one mark question is that group tests are usually in MCQ format, and this can come very well for a 1 mark. Another question can come that what is the difference between individual and group tests? So you should remember. Okay. Now the second category of test is on the basis of nature of items used. What is item? In psychology, items means the questions that are given in your psychological assessment. तो psychological assessment में जो questions होते हैं ना, जो आपको answer करने होते हैं, उनको items बोलते हैं. Okay. Now on the basis of items, क्या nature है इन items का? They are verbal, non-verbal, and performance tests. What are verbal tests? Let's understand. Okay. Verbal tests are tests where language is used. Okay. In non-verbal tests, language is used only for instruction. Remember, in verbal test आपको बोला गया है language use करके, मे बी आपको question पूछा गया है using language, what is the capital of Delhi, question पूछा गया how are you feeling today, language use करके. And in non-verbal test only language is used in instructions, and in non-verbal test symbols, pictures and patterns are used. Okay. An example of non-verbal test is Raven's progressive matrices. Okay. Another example is non-verbal intelligence test. So these are non-verbal tests. So verbal test में language use होती है in totality. Non-verbal test में language होती है सिर्फ instruction देने के लिए कि आपको ये choose करना है option, ये करना है, वो करना है, आपको instruction देगी बस. Performance test में you just do. Okay, no language is used, not even for instruction. You are asked to do. How do you do? You manipulate tasks. तो आपको बोला जाएगा different blocks है, उनको use करके आप एक picture बनाओ. There is an example course block design test, then Bhatia's factory of performance tests. So there are different performance tests. Okay. Now a question can come on RPM, so just read about it. 6 options are given to you. You have to choose which matches the best. Okay. Now on the basis of culture, there are culture fair and culture bias tests. Okay. What are both of them? Let's understand. Which tests होते हैं which have a culture bias. Now what is culture? Culture is everything, your society, your it's culture is basically everything, a combination of all the collective systems of beliefs, of your attitudes, of your achievements, everything. Okay. So language is a major part of the culture. So verbal test जो होते हैं वो mostly culture biased होते हैं. Why? Because if a test asks you a question in English and you are belonging to a culture where you do not know English, or if a test asks you question in French and you are not French and you do not know, that is different from your culture. So it's biased towards the culture, right? So some tests can be culture biased, some can be culture fair. So culture bias tests are not appropriate for everyone, and culture fair tests are tests which are appropriate and which can work for different cultures across. Now tests which are culture fair, mostly they are non-verbal and performance. Why? Because minimum use of language is there, right? Also, psychologists try to develop culture fair or at least culturally appropriate tests. Even if the test is not culturally fair, at least it's appropriate across cultures. To understand the intellectual capacity or the IQ or intelligence of a person in a better manner. Another example that I can give you is that intelligence, okay, a question in an IQ test comes, select the odd one out. Okay. Question is fish, bat, dog, and lion. Okay. So select the odd one out. Or another example is, this is your example: fish, bat, lion, and tiger. So in this question, if you select the odd one out, probably you would select, okay, I'll just give you 1, 2, 3 stars. So I'll give an example. Okay, if a question comes to you, choose the odd one out. First is fish, second is lion, third is tiger, and fourth is a mosquito. So if I ask a Japanese says fish is the odd one out. Why? Because fish is a food for them, and others are just animals. If I ask maybe an Indian, so an Indian says mosquito is the odd one out because mosquito is an insect and the other ones are animals. Both of them are correct, but their options are not based on their intelligence. The options are based on their culture, because in Japan, fish is uh, widely eaten by people as their food, so they see it as food. And in India, it's not eaten by the majority, so probably they not see it as their food. So what I mean here is that tests that are not culturally fair, tests that are culture biased, can display misleading results. That is why culture fair tests are very important. And non-verbal and performance tests reduce the culture bias up to a great extent, and a one mark question can come on this. Thank you for watching. Do like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and do let me know if you have any doubts in the comment section below. Thank you. Bye.